Good morning, everyone. Tis I, the douche with the noose. I am here with yet another SCP video, but this time it is something that I have never done before on this channel, a versus match. This video will be going over one of the most famous versus matches for both parties involved, those being the SCP Foundation and Creepypasta. The Scarlet King versus Zalgo. People have a lot of reasons to like this matchup, right? Just from how thematic it is, with each character representing two of the internet's oldest and favorite horror writing communities, to more simple battle boarding reasons where they just want to prove their preferred character is stronger and wins. A number of people have looked into these characters, but always through some faulty lens. So I would like to give it a shot myself. The single biggest problem when doing a versus match like this would be that canon with both the SCP Foundation and Creepypasta is rather strange. SCP is more so an enormous collection of different canons written by different authors that, while they do occasionally cross over, they're still largely independent of each other. Meanwhile, Creepypasta, it's just chaos where everyone is capable of writing pretty much anything they want, with no sense of quality control, unlike SCP. So most people just kind of default to compositing the two characters, which is a pretty slippery slope that can lead to a lot of problems, especially with characters like these that have more so become concepts rather than actual characters, with there being dozens upon dozens of iterations for both of them, all wildly varying in power. SCP would have the edge with something like Meta Foundation, a mega canon worked on by small army of writers from across SCP history, and basically encompasses all canons, which doesn't quite exist with the authors of Creepypasta. I won't be doing any compositing for either side, despite it being actually viable with SCP. Instead, I'll be picking a specific iteration for each character, which is really the only safe way to do a matchup like this, despite what some gooner from each side might say. To be exact, I'll be examining the original slash first iterations of the two characters and only use stuff from their original mythologies. For the Scarlet King, I shall be using the one written by Djoric from the Djoric verse, because he is pretty much the first fully realized iteration of the character. Djoric vs. Scarlet King is hands down the most popular iteration of the character as well, and is pretty much likely the iteration you picture when you think of the Scarlet King. It's a kind of malevolent god from the void that seeks to destroy the multiverse and some kind of cosmic tree. As for Zalgo, we'll be using Shmorky's iteration of the character. Those are just a bunch of arguments surrounding that iteration of the character, too, which will be dealt with in this video. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into this shit. Broadly speaking, the Scarlet King, also known as Karak, is generally emphasized to be a threat to all of existence. His whole thing is that he is going to war against creation, and said war threatens to destroy this thing called the Tree of Life, a giant cosmic tree that houses all the realms within the Jorikverse. Even deities like the Serpent and the Brothers Death say that he is capable of destroying creation and devouring its corpse. In his final fight against the combined forces of existence, as seen in the Real Adventures in Capitalism, he actually ends up destroying everything, causing creation to crumble into nothing and requiring all death and Isabel to recreate the multiverse. Even in his early life, where he's just a scavenger in the darkness below, he is capable of killing the other gods there, who are implied to be a threat to the Tree of Life as well. and were going to kill and enslave all the other deities in the darkness below. Before, he had his war against existence, devouring their hearts to become even stronger. So, Scarlet King scales rather solidly to creation. So, how big is this cosmology? The cosmology can vary in how big it is depending on what you use. There is some legit variety there with different interpretations, you will but as you will tell later on, they just aren't needed. Using just materials given to us by Djork and nothing more, there is a consistent lineup of evidence that suggests that the multiverse the Scarlet King scales to is infinite, possessing infinite universes. In Multi-U, it's said as clear as day that there are an infinity of universes, and because of these universes, anything is possible. Vision at Bitar also clearly tells us creation consists of infinite worlds, and later on down the article, creation itself is described as eternal. In the Djork sandbox, which just tells us a myriad of things about the Djork first cosmology, and is pretty much an encyclopedia on it, it says the universe is arrayed in infinite recombinations and variations, as in there are infinite variants on of the universe. Right underneath it, with the labyrinth definition, it said that Yesed, a critical foundation for creation, consists of innumerable facets. Even further down the blog, it says that there are an innumerable amount of worlds arrayed along the Tree of Life's roots. You get the idea. The cosmology that the Scarlet King scales to consists of infinite universes, making it multiverse level plus. It isn't even a straightforward leap in power either. No, as said, the Scarlet King, even pretty much as lowest, is capable of killing entities that threaten to take the Tree of Life for themselves. He has gotten a hell of a lot stronger since then, and scales rather consistently above characters that scale to creation, such as Mikan and the Serpent, the guardians of the tree, both of which the Scarlet King killed during their final fight, with the Serpent being torn in two and Mikan being shattered. As I have said before, there are other interpretations that depend on what you consider canon to the Djork verse. That would make this iteration of the Scarlet King a lot stronger, but I won't be getting into them because they just aren't necessary. Now let's talk about his opponent today, Zalgo. The first ever iteration of the Scarlet King was pretty powerful, and since Zalgo is pretty much known for being some overpowered cosmic god in the creepypasta community, sure, he should be insanely strong too, right? Not exactly. There isn't really a lot to talk about with Shmorky's Zalgo, the original iteration of the character, as it's a rather mysterious phenomenon that mostly corrupts comics, typically deforming characters in horrific ways, involving body horror, and at the absolute best, just causing the image itself to distort. In fact, it is stated that Zalgo is normally only capable of affecting things like comics, illustrations, and cartoons, instead of reality itself. Alongside this, Shmorky makes it clear that Zalgo isn't anything like a god from H.P. Lovecraft, which really goes against the idea that he is powerful. It's like some all-powerful god that will destroy everything. While it is somewhat implied that Shmorky that Zalgo isn't wholly limited to comics, with them being described as something awful that is coming, but this is a pretty worthless statement because we just don't know what would happen if Zalgo were to reach us somehow, if he's even capable of doing that, or if that's what this means. He's How strong he would be, or really any other factor about this vague statement, just worthless. This statement typically gets paired up with this scan saying that Zalgo will bring about the end times, but said statement comes from a fictional character that was corrupted by Zalgo. So Whether or not it actually applies to the real world is dubious as hell. Once again, we have zero idea on what this entails, even even if we decide to use this. Given this is all the original Zalgo has, Zalgo would be what 11 Neshe or low hypoverse level with some vague, unspecified, borderline useless higher potential that is implied but never actually shown or really talked about that much. Compare that to the Scarlet King's infinite universe scaling, it isn't really looking that good for Zalgo. I could stop there and talk about the verdict just with that, but I won't. Generally speaking, most creepypasta scalers are kind of desperate in order to make their own characters strong, hence why you see people composite them instead of treating them like any other character. Do you pick a specific iteration? So naturally, there are a lot of arguments that revolve around this iteration of Zalgo. So, in order to make things more interesting, I will be going over these arguments. Please do not take what I'm about to say about Zalgo's power here seriously. This is all just for fun and to somewhat prove a point. Everything from before is where he actually scales, and if you want more, I suggest you go watch Dr. Autism God's video on classic Zalgo, and also just his video on Sonic.exe, because that's also really good. In a random comic made by Shmorky, there is a genie that claims he has powers over all time and space. Even though this has absolutely nothing to do with Zalgo, let's just say that Zalgo scales to it. Also ignoring how space-time even works in the first place. Like, it isn't specific to any spatial dimension at all, so a two-dimensional plane would have space and time in it, two spatial dimensions and a rate of change. Let's say that this proves that but regardless, let's say that this proves that the comics that Zalgo are corrupting are fully developed universes with their own space-time continuums, while also ignoring the fact that Zalgo doesn't really do anything that would mean he would scale to this full universe, mostly just corrupting the characters in the comic instead of doing something like flat out destroying the comic. Let's also just ignore the overall gimmick of Zalgo, with that he is corrupting something that is explicitly not real and shouldn't be whole ass universes, especially since he can't really influence the real world. Let's just say the comics he's corrupting are just parallel universes to reality, and that him being unable to influence reality is just a range thing, which somehow fixes the problem. This makes further sense with this Gravity Falls comic involving Zalgo, also made by Shmorky, which some people say that he isn't limited to fictional spaces, while ignoring the very real possibility that he was just manipulating the TV through his control over the comic. But for maximum wank, we'll just treat it as such. There's also this invocation speech, which some Zalgo supporters claim is canon and that Shmorky made it. There's absolutely nothing that proves that it was made by Shmorky besides this blog from 2017 that just baselessly claims that Shmorky made it while showing zero evidence. Let's also ignore the fact that this goes against Shmorky's idea of Zalgo in the sense that he isn't some eldritch god like how this poem presents him as, and that this overall blog is pretty bad in quality and is reliant on stories that have nothing to do with Zalgo, like the Library of Eternity and unironically a joke SCP article. Like, what? Let's just say that this invocation is canon for no reason. And well, that would mean that Zalgo can destroy dimensions of completely unknown size, and let's just assume that these dimensions are fully formed universes. Also, Fuck it. That end time statement absolutely means that he is a threat to our reality and he is capable of flat out destroying it, instead of doing something that would be consistent with his character like corruption. So overall, some pretty good tier 2 wank that easily reaches into the universe ranges of power. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all here. The Scarlet King absolutely rails Zalgo, and this is overall a pretty horrific stomp in his favor. It is an effectively two-dimensional character going up against another character that can destroy infinite real universes. Even with that potential of him maybe not being limited to comics would be worthless here given how vague it is, and even that massive giggle wank I just got done talking about is useless here, because Zalgo would only scale to a finite amount of universes. The Scarlet King is, well, infinite. No number can really match infinity, and infinite universes will always be stronger than any numbered amount of universes. Even if for some stupid and arbitrary reason that doesn't consider the source material in the slightest, we see that Zalgo scales to infinite universes in some way, Scarlet King would still likely be above him as he has a history of killing characters on this level. Like he's basically been doing it since he was his weird equivalent of a baby. So really, this theoretical multiverse level plus Zalgo would just look like a tasty treat to the Scarlet King. Now onto the creepypasta battle borders that are probably foaming at the mouth right now, holding on to stories written by other authors and other things made by people who aren't schmorky. About to explain how Zalgo is some high outerversal god with a bunch of stories that don't even have anything to do with Zalgo. Stop treating that every single story ever written in the creepypasta community is a singular entity, like one giant canon. I know that canon is a very loose concept when it comes to creepypasta, but we are still absolutely capable of making a basic outline for what we can and can't use to scale a character, especially a specific iteration of a character. Like this isn't even about like a composite Zalgo either. Like some of these motherfuckers just bring up entirely unrelated stuff and use that in any argument, regardless of what character of Zalgo is being used here. Like, if you want to make a composite Zalgo scale, fine. Just don't treat it like just don't treat it like some representation of all Zalgos in any and all conversations. Like just don't treat it like he's like this composite Zalgo is representative for every single Zalgo that is out there. Like he just isn't. The very fact that there are some Zalgos that aren't limited to inverse fictional worlds like Shmorky directly proves this, among many other things that clearly entail that they are just their own separate things. Anyway, yeah, Scarlet King wins pretty easily. There are probably iterations of Zalgo that have a better chance of winning against the Jork vs Scarlet King, but I honestly haven't found anything convincing, especially when considering the higher end interpretations of the Scarlet King. I'm glad that the majority of my audience agrees with me on this, because they know that SCP just isn't something to fuck with. Genuinely up there with names like Dark Tower and the Cthulhu mythos. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. This video is pretty much me just shitting on Zalgo. Like, just quite a big mismatch. Zalgo versus SCP-2747 actually might be viable, but Zalgo also likely loses that one too. Maybe that one would be its own video someday. I don't know. Anyway, if you just want a taste on how enormous the SCP cosmology is, then I highly recommend you watch my SCP-3812 video. As for the next video, I'll be going back into the SCP cosmology rabbit hole and talk about the noosphere and maybe the other spheres beyond it, like the anti-noosphere. I can't make any promises on when it will come out, but yeah, that is on the table. Also, if you want quality SCP skilling, and I highly recommend you check out Alt Wiki. I've been working with them for some time now. They're good people, and I generally trust them. We also have a Zalgo, like a Schmorky Zalgo profile on there if you're also interested. That is all I have to say for now, and I'll see you guys later.